Hey there, Chadi Bazzi here, and welcome to another episode of the Top Listing Agent Show. I know I begin the show all the time by saying I'm super excited about the guests we have today. I really am really excited about the guests we have today. I do my darndest best to bring you the best of the best, people that are of like-minded, people who love the industry, people that want to give back to the industry, and people that are going to give you value today that you can actually apply in your business, whether you purchase something, opt into something or not. That's not the intention. The intention is to make a difference for you today. And I'm 100% confident that my conversation with Adam today is going to give you the aha moment that you need to step up, level up, and do more business. So Adam, welcome to the Top Listing Agent Show, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to thank you for all that you do. People who don't put on podcasts or have regular people on there don't realize how much time and energy it goes into bringing value to your audience. So I wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. And I got to comment the fact that you have a wonderful picture behind you that I think is awesome. And it started off with your spirit animal behind there. So that's awesome. So thank you for what you're doing. And I love the photo.
Thank you. And Adam, how do I pronounce your last name so I don't butcher it?
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to pronounce it. So it's Hergenrother. It's similar to how everyone says it, but it's Hergenrother. It took me to like high school to figure out how to say it. So we're good.
Awesome. Well, here you are right now. Look, Adam, some people may be familiar with who you are on our show. Some people may be hearing of you for the first time right now. Can you tell us a little bit about, who you are and why you're so awesome?
Well, hopefully people can take away anything from this show. It's that if I can do this, they can do this. And so hopefully I show them that I'm nothing any different than anybody else that's listening to this, just maybe a little bit more focused. But essentially my life journey started when I was about 15, 16 years old. During that period of time, I was 100 pounds overweight. I was in the drugs, failing classes. Really, I was kind of that role model student you wanted your kid to hang out with, right? So I came home one day and I just said, something's got to change in my life. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where I was going to go. And I just came home and I started crying as a 16-year-old, right? I didn't know. I just hit a wall. Like I was so dissatisfied with my life. I had hit this emotional threshold where I started to see a new opening in my life. And it's very scary when people get to that point in their lives where they see an opportunity, they see the truth of wanting changing part of them, but they're unwilling to change it because of fear. And so in that moment, I just said, you know what? I'm going to stop hanging out with all the kids that I'm hanging out with in high school, and I'm going to move on. And so I transitioned, and, in high school, when, it's like friends are everything, right? And so I was kind of in this no man's land for a period of time, and I got into sports. I ended up losing 100 pounds that year. I ended up turning my grades around, which though I'm not really that good at standardized test taking. So I never did amazing, but I ended up getting A's and B's in high school. And that's important because when I got that was about 16 years old, this is early, right? Late 15, 16 years old. Then I kind of went into college, and how I got into real estate is when I was a sophomore in college, I bought my first piece of real estate. Now at the time,
sophomore in college. Okay.
Yeah. So how it came about, because this is really important about my journey, is I had a roommate in UVM who was a roommate, but didn't go to school. Maybe some people had those roommates. He just kind of lived on my couch. Anyways, his dad owned a car dealership, and he came in one day and he said, hey, look, I think we can make like $1,000 each. And I'm like, how? He's like, we can buy this car, we can fix it up and sell it. And he's like, I need $500 from you. And I'm like, I don't have $500. I have like maybe $600 in my entire savings account. I was working while I was in school and I didn't have any money, right? And he's like, you can have it back in like 3 weeks. And I'm like, all right. So I wrote the check out. That's all I had, right? And so I was like, I wrote it out. We bought the car for like $800. We fixed it up for $200. We sold it for like $2,000. So I doubled my money in less than a week. Wow. And it wasn't the amount of money. Sure, it was $1,000. Time is a lot of money to me. But you know what it was, Chadi? It was the first time I experienced leverage. I never saw the car. I never worked on the car. I wrote a check out. It came back in, it deposited. We did this for about the remaining part of that sophomore year. I ended up probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in that venture. And then I also learned the power of contracts, because the minute he had enough money, he goes, I don't really need you anymore. So he started doing his own thing and has actually become very successful in other endeavors, which is awesome for him. then I took that money and I rolled it over into a new construction unit. And you got to figure, I graduated college in 2004. So I bought that in 2003, late 2002, early 2003. I put a deposit down on it to buy it. And so what was happening in real estate during this period of time? Everything was just going up, 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 and up. So I actually, in 2000, I actually had claimed that I was living there, even though I was living in my brother's basement without even a room, but I wanted to rent it out because I wanted the cash flow more than I wanted to increase my lifestyle. So I actually lived in my brother's basement. I bought this beautiful condo and I rented it out. Come to find out, apparently you're not supposed to rent things out when they have a condo max. And I didn't know that back then. So this company, I still feel today, feel like I'm the only person that has ever had their note called on them. So I actually got a letter from CTX Mortgage. If people remember that company way back then, they're out of business. But I got my note called them and said, we found out that you're not living there. And because the utility bill is in somebody else's name. So side note, don't ever do that. And so they actually forced me to sell it at the end of 2005. And this was the first lesson that life unfolds for me. At the time, I was like, I can't believe I have to sell this. I'm making positive cash flow. The market's just going up. I mean, every other month, it feels like it's up 10 grand or whatever it was. But as we know, I sold that in December. They were calling it December 31st of 2005. I sold it in late December 2005. After that, that was the highest unit that sold in there until 2014. So as much as I thought that I was being robbed, it was a gift basically calling that. And I took that money and I rolled it into buying multifamily units, which kind of started me. And at the time, I wasn't selling real estate. I was working as a financial controller for a company. I was an underwriter, so I was underwriting investment deals. I did a stint on Wall Street too as an underwriter because I graduated in finance. So I did kind of that packaging. When I sold it, that's what I actually paid a commission on it. And I was like, man, I just want to check out for like $20,000 or whatever it was, $15,000 for this commission. I'm like, I think I could go into sales, right? And so I sold it in late 2005. In mid 2006, 3 months later, I got into sales and real estate. I'll kind of pause there.
Wow. I love, the thing that is coming to mind for me right now is a quote that one of my mentors used to say a long time ago, is that the universe is unfolded exactly as it should. So let it. And, that's what it sounds like for me. It's like, I would be, if I'm forced to sell a property, I'm I'd be like freaking out. But for you, what a blessing that was at that time. Yeah. And then it just, kept on going through a journey. One thing that showed up before we continue talking about the journey and stuff like that, this is from, up to this point. You mentioned the words that most people are unwilling to change because of fear. And I want to talk about that for a second because I'm of the mindset of like, hey, whatever you believe, everything's a product of your belief system. Now, and you're the greatest testimony for that because whoever thought you'd be exactly where you're at right now, which we're going to get to in a little bit, having, the 16-year-old that was crying, saying, hey, I'm overweight, life sucks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here you are living the life that anyone and everyone would imagine to live. Can you talk about this unwilling to change because of fear? Because I think that is one of the biggest crippling things for people going to any next level, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly speak to it more intelligently now than I could when I was 16, but essentially fear is just imagination. That's all it is. Your mind imagines some future event that could go wrong or imagine some future negative thought pattern that goes on there. So there's no different. Fear itself is just you listening to that little voice, which everyone has. Nobody's immune to that voice. It's in your head and it's talking about what could go wrong. And what you do is you kind of Velcro yourself to that thought, and that fear then extrapolates on itself. It keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it just pulls you down this rabbit hole to a point where you have paralyzation of what could happen to me, why is life folding this way? It can just grip you onto this. The way I also like to think of this is, if you have kids, I have 3 under 9. And so when I walk into my son's room and he's like, wow, I want you to come, I feel like there's a monster in my room. So we walk in there, I'm like, I open the closet door and we're like, look, there's no monster in here. And the kid's going, no, but I feel like there's one under the bed. So you look under the bed and you kind of go in this thing. They have this imagination that there's monsters. And as adults, we laugh at that and go, of course there's no monsters. Yet at the same time we laugh at that, we have our own monster, which is allowing fear to grip us. And so people that have worked themselves through that, it's no difference. You were still acting as that child. We've just manifested that fear differently. It's the fear of what's going to happen to me. It's where could this end up? What if I fail? What if I do all these things? And you know what the reality is we've all had fear at some points in our lives. Well, let me back up. There's primal fear, and then there's psychological fear. The fear that we're talking about is psychological. The primal fear is like, oh shit, I'm being chased by a lion, I better run. But here's what I always tell everybody that if you're actually in primal fear, I promise you're not going to stop and think about what's going to go wrong. If you're actually in a primal fear situation, you're just acting. In fact, you're probably closer to being in that point than you ever have been because you're actually out of your mind, not listening to your mind and just acting upon what you need to do. So the psychological fear is just imagination. And it's just, we extrapolate the imagination, it pulls us down there. So one of the things, the technique you can do, at least when you start to hear that voice and you start to become Velcro to it, you can just do a quick little 3, 2, 1, relax. You count down and you just drop your shoulders and you breathe out, because we all know that we've had fear, and 99.99% of the time, what we think or imagine what's going to happen never does, never, ever does. Now, and there may be some things that we've got to change. It doesn't mean you can't work on fixing the situation. But the minute we're going to allow ourselves to listen to that voice around fear, it's going to paralyze you from living the authentic or truth of what is in front of you and what you actually need to do.
I love it. I love it. So what about, one of the things, so basically you're living in your head. You're living in your head, you're creating a story, you're buying into the story, you're making a story bigger than it is, etc. And that's exactly what cripples you. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about in another video that I think would also be a solution to this is to change the story in your head, etc. You talked about the future self, the future self and the visualization or anything like that. Can you talk about where does one begin to create the habit and see themselves in the future and all that good stuff? Can you talk a little bit about that? I think it's very important. We have an entire course on that. I just want to get your perspective.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're doing that course. Well, I think the first starting position for anybody is you have to accept exactly where you are right now. It doesn't mean you beat yourself up. It's not shaming. It's not egoing. It's just you accept exactly what is going on right now. Even in today's market, I've got 1,000 agents underneath my belt, and we'll get into that in a little while. And they all are going through emotional things, and they all want the market to change or this to change. I go, you're going to cause your own level of suffering if you don't accept exactly what's happening. If it's raining and you're fighting the rain, you're suffering instead of accepting the rain and allowing it to do what it is. So part of it is accepting exactly where you are and being okay with exactly where you are, and then using, a visualization tool, or we call what's called a future self, what's on 6 different categories, spiritual, physical, financial, job, professional, family. Like, where do you want these 6 components to look like in your life? And we usually write them out in 1 year or 3 year increments. And as you do, you kind of write it out like, I weigh 185 pounds and have 10% body fat, and I'm outside in all weather conditions, whatever it is that you have, you write it out if it's already happened. Because the thing is you have to direct yourself otherwise you're just going to get caught up with things. So the future self is directing you to knowing where you're going. And as you know where you're going, you're going to stay the course much easier than you are to allow that fear to pull you outside of yourself. So here's the thing with techniques or tools, they work at every level. The thing that I caution people on with techniques and tools, though, is after you master a certain technique, you've got to be willing to give that one up for the next one. And so if you mastered A, B, and C of the alphabet, but you never went to D, E, and F as a child, you wouldn't grow. So a lot of times adults, I see this when you're working personally with people, is that they get stuck in a certain technique and they're now looped into this same technique instead of learning a new one. And as you learn a new techniques are designed, I always joke about this. They're like giving a kid an iPad to stay focused long enough so they don't get off the train till you can get to your destination. Techniques are there to get you to the next level. But if you get trapped in a technique, then you can't necessarily take yourself in your business or your own personal lid to the next level, because you're just spiraling around in the same technique. So at some point, somebody's got to bring a new technique or a new level of thinking that increases that action, which then creates this virtuous cycle for you.
I love this future self exercise, and I definitely want to drive that home right now to our audience, whether they're watching it or listening to this. if you haven't already done so, you want to sit down, you want to take some time out, and you just want to think 1 year or 2 years or 3 years into the future and say, hey, if life was as good as it could possibly be, what would it look like in the area of my finances, in the area of my family, in the area of my spirituality, physical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can add even beyond the 6 experiences, contributions, whatever you want it to be. Now, I'm not sure exactly the way you do it. Then what we encourage our audience to do, our clients to do, is to actually take themselves into the future and write out a letter and address that letter either to themselves or to anyone and say, hey, dear, whoever, just wanted to write you a quick letter and tell you about all the amazing things that, have taken place in my life over the course of the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. This is the life I'm living, etc. And then read that every single day. And if you read that every single day, you're actually doing something that you're unaware of, and that's building a relationship with the future you that you are working towards. The second thing that's happening is you're removing the filters, you're removing the blocks, you're activating your reticular activating system to see all the opportunities that have been around you this whole entire time that you're unable to see because you're crippled in the wrong thinking.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well said.
So just wanted to drive that home. All right, so we get to the point to where it's now, you
getting into real estate,
etc. And now you're like, I just want a $15,000 commission check. Light bulb goes off. What happens next, Adam?
Yeah, so I get into real estate. I started off at Remax, and I at that time in 2006, the market was relatively still strong. It was starting to kind of go down, particularly in our marketplace, and they didn't have an office for me. And so I worked from a 400 square foot apartment that I was renting. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, but we couldn't even shut our door. She was helping me in real estate. She had been in real estate manufacturing sales and had her license before. So she kind of helped me get into it. Then she had taken a couple of years off from doing that and working more for a builder. Then we get in there, and basically I got my license. The first 30 days, I didn't have really any training, but I borrowed $8,000 to start our business. I took $4,000 of that, and I went to a Howard Britton conference. If people remember Howard Britton, he's passed away, but he had this conference. And I remember going there in like the first week or week and a half of getting my license. And I went there in the first hour I was there, I was like, it was like drinking from a fire hose. I was like, I got everything I need. And I saw these people on stage doing 20 million, 25 million, 30 million. And, at the time back then, that was a lot of production. Still is now, but that was a real lot. And so I remember I came home and I'm like, I'm going to do this. And in the first 30 days, when I came back from there, I put 3 homes under contract. And I showed up at my first sales meeting, and I had people, and that was the first time I'd seen most people in the office. And I showed up there and they go, hey, what did you do? And I thought I did something wrong. I go, what do you mean? They're like, well, what did you do? How did you put 3 homes under in your first 30 days? Because I was recognized on the board. People were coming up, and I said, well, I don't know. I just lead generated. They go, well, how much did you lead generate? How long? I go, I don't know. I didn't really monitor on a daily basis, but probably 10 to 12 hours a day. And they go, you did what? I said, well, what did you do? Because I like, maybe I missed something. They're like, well, I didn't really lead generate. And that's why I didn't put any pendings up. And I'm like, they didn't say it like that, but that's essentially what they were saying. And so I held this little thing in my head where I would do whatever it took to get an appointment a day, literally an appointment a day. And I didn't win every time. I would go and door knock. I would bring cupcakes to for sale by owners. I would, every, mechanism or tool that I could use, I was going out there to generate buyers and sellers. And then I just wouldn't stop. So at this point in my life, I had no kids, and I was full gun ho of working 7 days a week. And I did this for the first, 90 days. The first 9 months I was in real estate, essentially, we put 37 homes under contract, which is pretty cool for first year. And then I think I did like 100 the next year or something on those. I ended up becoming, in 2008, I was the Remax Associate of the Year worldwide, not because I had the most volume, but because of how fast I grew in a very short period of time in such a small Vermont area. Vermont, we have more cows than people. So I started quickly becoming the #1 agent in the state of Vermont, and all the accolades you kind of want. And frankly, in the beginning part of my business career, it was all about proving to the world and proving to myself how badass I was, essentially. Like, everyone look at me, you should see me, I'm pretty amazing, look what I'm doing. It was all about Adam, right? And picture on the side of a car, like all these things. It was so ego marketing if I look back on it, but it was a chapter in my life that I needed to go through. And so then I had this goal in my life before I even got into real estate, that if I was making $500,000 in income, that somehow when I made that number, like somebody was going to inject this feeling of goodness or peace in my life, or somehow I was going to reach some state that was just elevated and it was going to be amazing and nothing was ever going to have a problem. And so I remember this clearly. I was having dinner with my mom when I was in 2008. I was 27 at the time, and I made $500,000 in income approximately that year. So I went home and I'm like, hey, mom, who's the most unassuming person. I'm like, I made like $500,000 in income this year. And she's like, oh, that's great. Pass the ketchup. And in that moment, I realized that people just don't care. Like I thought everything was like people should bow to me and like it was going to be this massive thing and people were going to be amazing and they were going to celebrate me and all these things, and nobody cared. And you know, it was such a blessing because I got really confused. I didn't know what life was supposed to be about. I thought everyone my entire life had told me to go make it materially, get the income, and you were going to make it. You were going to arrive. And I had picked this $500,000 in income, and man, I hit it and I did it fast and I put everything into it and nobody cared. And I felt worse personally. Forget about everybody else. Even if they were cheering me on, I was getting awards and stuff, but inside it felt hollow, felt inadequate. And so at that point I stopped and I just said exactly what I said basically 10 years earlier. I said, something's wrong with my life and I'm not happy with the way it is and I need to make a change. It was when I was 16 and basically when I was 27. And it was about a decade after, 11 years after, I sat there and I said, this is not what life is supposed to be. I said, I'm not going to live my life feeling like this. If I thought money was going to give me this and it's not, I don't know what is. And so I need to go change my life. And, you know, I said that. And for a couple of years, I faked that more than I was, because my ego kept showing back up and wanting to run the show. And at that time, when you were asking different questions, just like your future self conversation you just had, when you ask different questions, the quality of your life increases because those questions get answered. Yeah. And so I started asking that and I got really deep into meditation before meditation was popular. And so I started really meditating and really I went into a self-inquiry operation mode. I started learning about myself. I wanted to learn why I acted this way. I learned other people's behavior. I took and I basically spent over $100,000, 25% of my income, and 20% of my income, and to go travel around to learn NLP techniques in the Netherlands, Tony Robbins events. You know, I got a psychology degree. I mean, I was doing anything to learn about myself because I was like, why do I feel this way when everyone in my entire life has told me money was going to change the way I felt? And so I really want to know the answer. And then I realized that, of course, it's a larger conversation now, but back then it wasn't as much. That money is money and it's good for what it can do and it can provide time and energy. But if you ever think that money is going to bring you long-term joy and happiness, you're foolish. There's nothing outside that's ever going to make you or give you the feeling you're looking for. And the only joy that you're going to find at the top of the mountain is the joy you bring. And so I started taking that approach and I started getting really deep. And in that moment, I actually started, over those years, I started really making life about other people. And I say that, it sounds cliche, and it was really, though, it was a really just an authentic change. I wasn't trying anymore. I was actually really trying to support other people. And it felt weird because I was so self-indexed for so long that I was trying to make it about other people. And people are like, wow, you're changing. And what's going on with you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just changing. Right. And so and that's the funny part is the minute I started making life about other people, that's when our entire organization started to just grow geometrically. Mm-hmm. You know, and I opened up I ended up switching to Keller Williams, and I think all real estate companies are great. And I just went to Keller Williams and I opened up a market center in Vermont, became the #1 real estate company in the state of Vermont really quickly. So then basically in 2012, I said, in 2011, I said, Vermont is too small for me. I need to expand. And at the time, people are maybe familiar a little bit with expansion now. We called it duplication. And so basically I took my team, and I had gotten out of production at this point. So I was just leading a team. And I opened one in Portland, Maine. And I launched an agent there that was about $4 million in production. And we ended up within 3 years, that team was doing 30 million in production. About 60 days after, let me back up. When I launched that team, I didn't know it was going to work. Actually, people told me I was going to go to jail. And I was working with my mentor, Gary Keller, at the time, who was like, yeah, I've been trying to get people to expand. Actually, where MAPS comes from, their coaching company, Mega Agent Production Systems, was all about the expansion, but just people couldn't understand it at the time. He saw it. And so he told me about it in a group. There's like 3 or 4 of us at the time that started to expand. And I spent over the course millions of dollars, which we'll get into in a few minutes, learning that. But 90 days into expansion, here was this moment again in my life. I never had my license in Maine. I was working through somebody, never talked to any clients. And all of a sudden in 90 days, we made $22,000 that month. And the way our expansion works is we split the profit 50-50 with our CEO. So we split the profit and I got $11,000. You got $11,000. And I transferred into my account and I go, it wasn't even the dollar amount. It was a lot of money at the time for me too. But I remember going, this works. This is that leverage that I felt before. I can see this. I didn't get my license. I didn't deal with any clients. People didn't know who I am. It was called Universal Properties International at the time. And so then I launched another team in Connecticut, and that team is nine and a half years later, almost 10 years, is still with us. So I really, and then of course I launched another team. Then we started making a whole bunch of mistakes during expansion. There was a 3-year period where we were making, I went through every type of expansion lesson you could pause. It was really just business building is what I'd call it. Forget about expansion. It was just, I was building a scalable business and I made a ton of mistakes, spent millions of dollars. Kind of fast forward to where we are, today, we have a 95% agent retention rate we have 35 teams. We have 35 locations in 25 different states. We're the number 2 expansion team in the world. Last year we had a profit of $4.4 million. And that was one of our organizations. This year we're up almost 100% in profit so far. So we just hit this scalable component where it just really started to really grow massively because of all the layers that we had in there. And also during that time, I launched a development construction company. I have over 1,000 units that are in permitting or that I own. I own healthcare campuses. So I got involved in all that stuff as well too. And we're on the verge of announcing a very big next level thing that we're working on over the next 60 days, which the whole real estate community will see this when it happens. So I'm just really excited about where we're going and all the hard work that's kind of get in there. But it really is, I'll tell you, it's just like everyone says, it's like slowly, then boom. It's like you feel like an imposter a lot of times. You feel like a fraud when you're going and building your company. And then all of a sudden it just hits this skyrocketing point where it just goes straight up. And it looks like it does, but really what you've done is over the last 10 years, you've built this platform that can now be expanded. It's like if you jump on a trampoline, you first go down to go up. And that's kind of how I recognize business building. And then it's just, now we're in that massive kind of growth phase where we're doubling and to where we're going. I mean, and you see it, if you go look at Inman's news right now, it's all about the new teams. It's the new normal teams, it's teams. And, there'll be a few 3 or 4 teams in the nation that start sucking up. We have teams that are joining us now that are $60 to $100 million. We're announcing on Monday a team that's $65 million that joined us. We're growing as an understanding from a team perspective. We're growing at about 100 million in volume a month right now. Wow. Not from our existing teams, from agents coming into our organization, because we have HR, we have a board of directors, we have healthcare for our agents if they need it. We have we take care of all the financial responsibilities of the team. We have marketing and platform and training and accountability and PC coaching. So agents or location leaders only have to do 10% of what they're doing now. And we're going to show them how we can make them more money. That's the crazy thing is most businesses, when I actually break it down and look at their businesses, they're lonely. They're sick of doing it on their own. They don't want the responsibility and they're really not making that much money. And the teams that are, they have no quality of life and they don't know how to get out of it. And so these expansion, kind of I think there's 2 or 3 really good expansion teams in the world right now. And I think that when people come to that, they go, it's my easy button to get out, to be able to go build something that's larger than myself without going backwards in income, but having to be able to take my skills and really develop and grow it from there. So I'll just pause for a second and share a lot there.
Man, you got me fired up, man. Like, I'm just like thinking in the back of my mind, obviously everything that you've done is earned, but the question that I really have right now is like, way back then, did you see that you'd be where you're at today?
In some respects, I thought it would be faster. In some respects, I didn't think it would happen at all.
Yeah. So did that ever get in the way? Like, did that ever get in the way of like, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Am I going to go for it anyways? In building something as big as you have, I'm sure there were a lot of ladders you had to climb. And with every single ladder that you were climbing, there came a new obstacle. There came, something that you never even thought of that wanted to drop you back, two steps backwards, etc. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. There was many times that I didn't think we were going to make it at all. There was many times when I didn't think that this was going to work, and I was like, oh, let's go put my energy on my construction company because I can control that differently. Because dealing with, independent contractors is, it's a very transitory environment. And so we really focused on making sure that when we partner with people, that we partner with them for life. Here's the other thing, like when people partner with us, we have exit clauses. So if they ever want to sell their business, we buy it from them. And it's already agreed upon in their contract that they signed with us. So they have an exit strategy, because most people don't have exit strategies with their businesses. So we really lay all of this out. So I knew that we were doing something and it was going to be big, but there's many times along that path where I almost felt like throwing in the towel. I think that was more from not an individual day or two, and then I'd work myself out of it. So the advice that I have is, you're never really as bad as you think you're doing, or as you are on those days that nothing really works and it feels like everything's happening. And conversely, you're never really as good as you are on the days that everything's going smooth. And so you kind of just recognize that I'm going to wake up every day and put my 2 feet forward. And I'm going to just tackle this one bite at a time and keep pushing it forward and making the highest level of clarity of decisions that I can to push our organization forward. And if it happens to be that we don't make it, I'm going to have wonderful learning lessons, and I'll apply that to something else. If we happen to make it further, awesome. And we're going to do this. And so you don't allow yourself to extrapolate the imagination that we're not going to make it. You do the best that you can, taking the steps, and then learning and failing very small. Most people fail too large to be able to work themselves out of their failure. So for me, I wanted to fail often, fast, and really frequently in the beginning so I could handle and pay for the mistakes. The other thing I have to mention too is that I also had side hustle. Like I own the brokerage that was making $300,000 a year. I had the local Vermont team that was making, $500,000 a year, whatever that was. I had other speaking engagements making money. So I was making money to be able to subsidize that in other ways. Then we had rentals and things like that. So I had money to invest, and I didn't really increase my lifestyle to the level that, I could have, which would then have put more pressure on my business to perform, not allowing me to take the risks that I knew that I needed to do in order to push through all of this.
Love it. And Adam, I know that we are, coming up on time before you have to get to your next appointment.
10 minutes, that's fine, yeah.
Okay. So one of the questions is that I have, it's for the audience, and someone with as much experience as you have. If I was a real estate agent right now, any real estate agent, doesn't matter what level of production, whether you're brand new, you're doing 10 deals a year or 10 deals a month, it doesn't matter. But I'm thinking to myself that there's another level and I kind of plateaued, and what would be 1, 2, or 3 things that you would tell me to either look at or start doing immediately in order for me to continue to level up and grow?
Good question. I would start working on yourself.
Okay.
And I would create a proactive morning routine. So my morning routine, it's a little bit later now, but I got really big into Ironmans for a long time. I did 21 in 3 years. But during that time, I was getting up like 3 a.m. Now I'm getting up between 4 and 4:30, but I spend about 3 hours every single day, honestly, for probably the last 7 or 8 years of my life at that amount, working on myself. I meditate twice a day. I journal for about 30 minutes every day. I exercise for at least an hour, hour and a half, listening to Audible, listening to podcasts, listening to books. And then I have a break in the middle of my day where I meditate again and make sure I focused on my eating. So the majority of it's every day, there's very focused effort on growing me. And so that then I don't grow me to be self-indexed. I'm growing me to take the organization to the next level. So it opens up different ways of thinking so that I can see the next lane or the next path. And that's what leaders do, is that they're constantly evolving themselves so they can see something before somebody else doesn't and be willing to go after it. And so really setting the stage for your own personal growth or conscious growth or spiritual growth, whatever word makes sense for you, journey starts today. Even if it's 5 minutes, everyone can do 10 push-ups and then write down 5 things you're grateful for. Then let that leak in, because it was a journey for me. It didn't start with 3 to 4 hours a day. By the way, even today, if people are curious about my calendar, I work 3.5 structured days a week. So basically Monday through Thursday at 5, I start at 9, I end at 11 or 11:30, then I start again at 1 and I end basically at 4. And that's Monday through Wednesday. Thursday, I'm done by 1 o'clock. And then Thursday afternoon, Friday, there's no appointments that go in my calendar unless it's approved by me. And Thursday afternoon and Friday are all about, it's all about creative time for Adam. It's white space. I don't just go hang out on a beach. Like I'm listening. I may read an entire book in a day. Like that becomes my job, right? And so over time, I've just put a lot of energy and I'm just following people's models. Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, it doesn't matter who they are. What do? Bill Gates carries 25 books around him at a time. You know, Warren Buffett reads 7 hours a day, at least in his heyday. Now he's down to 4 at 91 years old and his brain's still sharp. He's CEO of the company, right? And it's a focus on growing and learning so that you can bring that attributes into the organization. Then I would once that's number one. Number two, I would decide on what you want out of life, right? You can't have everything. You can't know everything. You can't do everything. So you need to make sure you're choosing very wisely on who you're following in life, right? Like I wouldn't follow Warren Buffett for his personal life. I'd follow his investment strategy, but I don't want his personal life. You know, I may follow somebody else for their health, but I wouldn't want their business life. So you take components of that and follow and choose wisely how you bring those models into your life to build upon. So find somebody who's really living the life that you want, which is no right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't care what you want to do. Find the person who's doing that. Then look at their entire life. Then decide whether or not that's something that you want to do. Not just a snigment of what you see on social media and think that you can go replicate their life by doing that and wondering why it doesn't work for you. And as you're evaluating what you want to do, that's when you get to decide is, do I want to do this on my own? Do I want to be on a team or do I want to be an individual agent? And then who's going to support me based on that answer? Who's the best organization for me to work with so that I can apply myself based on what I have? Then third, and as you know, I would get a coach, regardless of what you're doing, as early as you can. Every professional has coaches. So you get a coach. And even if you do it 6 months and take a little time off to save money, then get back into it. Get a coach that's helping you, that's really focused on what that means for you. And there's a whole different flavor of coaches. They're all great. Find the one though, that's going to work with you where you're at and where you're trying to go in the immediate future. Then partner with them. So those are the 3 steps that I would add into somebody's life.
I love it. I love it. So get your morning routine down right, no matter what. Number 2, get clear on the life that you absolutely want to live. Yes. And number 3, get yourself a mentor, which is, you know, your shortcut to get into where you want to get to a lot faster with less obstacles.
Yeah.
Adam, this has been amazing, my friend. You got me personally thinking, you know, bigger already. And I'm going to get off this right now and I'm going to grab my journal and I'm going to freaking start writing some things. And I'm fired up. And I know our audience is totally fired up right now. And they're saying, who is this Adam? I've never heard of this guy. I want to know more about this guy. I want to enter his world. Where can I find his website? How can I get into your world? So how can people reach out, connect, you know, get whatever you got going on and have to offer?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, you can go to adamhergenrother.com. It's not as hard to spell it as adamhergenrother.com, and it's got links to everything we have. You know, my chief of staff and I wrote a book called The Founder and the Force Multiplier. That's a 6 times bestseller. It really talks about the relationship. So that's the opportunity there. We have our podcast too. It's called Business Meets Spirituality, where we talk a lot about, you know, the intersection between wanting to grow and contribute in life, but also not losing the sense of joy and peace that you have in your life. And we tie a lot of those things in there. So you can certainly find that in whatever, you know, wherever you listen to your podcast on there. But those would be the 2 places that I would go, and everything's linked there.
I love it. And I'll go ahead and make sure that, you know, we add the links to the show notes on, you know, on the podcast and on chadibazzi.com, tlashow.com. So we'll make sure for the person that's driving, if they go there, they'll be able to find it and all that good stuff. I so appreciate your time, my friend. I feel like this conversation could definitely turn into a multi-hour conversation. And I look forward to having you on again in the near future. I appreciate you, brother.
Excited to do part 2.
Awesome, brother.